We've had a number of companies, junior explorers out, Australian companies, on our site to try and encourage them to come in and have a look at, you know, a whole host of different minerals, rare earths, niobium, nickel, copper, gold, lithium. You know, it's there for the picking.
We're very particular about where we wanted you to sit now that you're microphoned up. Thank you very much for joining us. I will just introduce you all again, although there is names and job titles in your menu guide over there. To my immediate right, we've got Kristy Young, who's a non-executive director with Brazilian Rare Earths. I won't go into all of the companies that you see on the board, if you don't mind at this moment. Next, Kristy is Chris Gale, managing director of Latin Resources, and one of the people and companies that I mentioned who supported us so strongly down the years with Latin America down under. And then to the far right, although I assume not politically, is Elliot Luke, consul at Clifford Chance here in Perth. Thank you for joining us, all of you. And can I just reiterate Bill's Naroon? I'm glad to see that, John, you're not too close to the Archam table, given we've taken a very brave decision to hold this Latin America event in the week of the Copa America final, in which Argentina beat Colombia 1-0. John, as an Englishman who watched his team lose to Spain on the same day, I sympathise with you, and we can commiserate together later on. I've got a few questions here, but like I say, please be ready to ask some of your own, because I'm quite a lazy journalist at times. Chris, I'm going to start with you, because you probably operated there longer than anybody else on this panel. Latin Resources has been in Brazil, it's been in Argentina, it's been in Peru, it's been in Chile. The company spent more than a decade in the region, and you continue to pursue opportunities there, even when foundational projects perhaps didn't go as well as you'd hoped originally. Even during COVID, despite coming back and looking at WA, you eventually headed back to the region. Why did you keep going to the region even when things, you know, appeared quite difficult?
It's a wonderful question, and our motto at Latin Resources is hold your nerve or never give up. I'm in a room, thanks Paydirt anyway for putting this on, and I think Latin America, since the Latin America Down Under days, is starting to get a lot more momentum. We're seeing a lot more interest in certainly South America. I'm amongst a lot of good friends here, junior explorers, and the stats for junior explorers are not fantastic. You know, like, so 27, I've said this a number of times, but I think there's 2750 listed Australian companies now. 950 are junior explorers, 750 live within a kilometre, mostly live, but have their offices within a kilometre of West Perth and West Leederville. 10% of those will have a discovery, 5% of those will go into production. So they're the numbers that we deal with every day. So when you have a great bunch of geologists, you know, we have another motto. We don't pay the geologists to look for it, we pay the geologists to find it, right? And so we use those analogies, we use that theme quite consistently. We've been in South America for 15 years. We start off probably with iron ore, then copper. We still have copper assets in Peru that we're really bullish about. And we then, you know, just a little backstory was I saw the guys, Ken Brisbane in particular, doing what they're doing with these things called pegmatites, spodumene pegmatites in 2016-17. I actually spoke to Ken and he told me what was going on with these pegmatites. So we got our team out of Peru to look into desktop studies across South America for lithium pegmatites. We're the first company to start looking for hard rock pegmatites in South America. Found some in Argentina, drilled those, they came up reasonably well, we still have those. Then someone sent us a deck for a company called Sigma Lithium, who's the preeminent, who are really the Pilbara Minerals of Brazil, sent us the deck. They announced their first resource, sent our guys in there, and the rest is history. And it's just about the end of the day, having the right people. Our team, I actually got a really good geologist, 2 geologists out of Australia. One was with the senior exploration guy at Pilbara Minerals. Put him in there. We got our team around him. They spent 12 months looking for pegmatite, spodumene, I mean in creek beds. The bush that these guys went through, this thorny bush, it's just an amazing story, but they ended up finding a little bit of spodumene in a creek bed. We decided on that and the rest is history. So we now have the largest lithium deposit in Brazil, single lithium deposit. And we actually built that over, we started and COVID hit, we had to pull out, that was 2019. Had to pull out. I left Brazil after 2 weeks in the field, March the 12th, 2020. Got hauled off the plane in Santiago. You know, we had all these temperature checks and I didn't know what was going on, right? So they shut down for a year. We got back onto the ground, end of 21, finished the drill, identification of drill targets, started drilling in February 2022 and had our first hit. So within that first hit, within 11 months, we had our first JORC resource. Drill permits done, everything done, and that was 13 million tonne. We're now at 77, heading for 100. The point is, you keep going. You don't give up.
And does that point to what the opportunity you saw on the continent all of those years ago, undrilled, untested targets in country geology that is very highly prospective but hasn't been tested to the same extent that, say, Western Australia has?
You know, there's a lot of guys here who've worked in South America. Tony Rivera and a few others have worked in South America. The geology is second to none. Some of the jurisdictions are outstanding, some aren't. So you've got to work that out. But I actually had a geo from another company through about a month ago in Brazil. I took him, he came up to look at our project. And he said, I think there's another 5 major, and he'd spent some time through Minas Gerais, where it's now the lithium valley, the new lithium valley, the new lithium hub, a lot of people calling it. He said there's another 5 major discoveries to be made with lithium in this district. And he was a very, very, very smart geologist. So you're right. How much more is out there? Not only in lithium, Brazil's got niobium, copper, nickel, rare earths. It's blessed. And, you know, another interesting story about South America is and I remember this one story many years ago in Peru. We tried to buy a copper project and a lot of the mines, the geology there is privately held. And I went up to this guy and said, look, we want to buy your copper project. He said, okay, well, how much, blah, blah, and had a discussion. And I said, I'll give you X, but then we're going to spend $5 million in the ground to get a JORC resource. He said, what's that mean? I said, well, we spend money, we drill it up, and we get a resource, and then we start developing. He said, well, why don't you spend $5 million updating the plant and pulling it out of the ground? I know it's there. It sort of resonates with you, but it's like, really? You know, we've got to go through this process. They just dig it up and sell it, right? A lot different the way we think. And sometimes you sit back and say, well, maybe they are right, you know. But that's generally, you'll see a lot of good minds been in families for generations, you know. And that's just something that we do it very well. Our explorers are the best explorers in the world, but it just takes a bit of time for us to get it right, you know.
It does take a bit of time, and for the junior sector, it's been very tough these last couple of years. Yet, Chris, you sit here as a company that's gone from a market cap of sub 50 million at one point to plus 500, 600 now. Kristy, Your company, Brazilian Rare Earths, is listed as the largest IPO, resources IPO of 2023. And it's just gone from strength to strength since, and now sitting at around $700 million market cap. I mean, put simply, what do you put that interest down to? Well, you know, why is it as companies like Latin, like Brazilian, like Meteoric, having success at a time when it's so tough for Australian juniors?
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. I'm an independent non-executive director. I joined the board March last year. The company listed in December, just snuck in for 2023. On the 21st of December, we raised $50 million in the IPO. In my opinion, the project was quite advanced before listing. So they had a JORC resource before they actually listed it, which they firmed up, I think, earlier in 2023. In 2022, they had a smaller resource. So they invested a lot of their own money before listing, which is typically not what happens. So in late 2022, they raised $21 million in a seed round, where a lot of those initial investors did come in. So really strong support from the start. The people it's more of a global view. I mean, yes, it's listed on the ASX, but I think sometimes in WA we forget that it's a big wide world out there. So our directors are spread across the globe. We're actually all heading to site next week. So I leave on Saturday midnight. So it's a shame this wasn't next week, because then I'd have more visuals to explain. But we've got one director in France who's relatively new. He's come from a background as previous COO, CEO of Linus, CEO of Serra Verde, which is a neighbouring rare earth project that's being developed now. And also our head geologist has discovered Serra Verde over 40 years in country. So I think there's a few parts to it, but I think the fact that the project's very advanced, there's multiple rare earth styles there, there's a lot of tenements, over 1,400 square kilometres. The MD's Brazilian, but went to high school and uni in Perth, so a great blend. So it really is more of a global board, if you like. So director in France, director in Brazil, chair in Sydney, COSEC in Brisbane, myself as a director here, other director in France. So so there's a few things. I'd say advanced project, good people, a strong investment base, and the right attitude and growth mindset to progress things.
Great, thanks, Kristy. Elliot, we've talked about the in-company management and approach. We've talked about the geology, but obviously the other element, particularly on international investments, is the jurisdiction and the investment climate in the jurisdictions. Have you got any opinions on why perhaps the companies we have here and others represented here have been so successful in Brazil in the last few years? Has there been a political switch in the country or in its investment outlook to sort of foster that new wave of interest?
Thanks, Dominic, and thank you for inviting me. It's interesting. I was talking to Chris just over lunch, and he was saying that Brazil is one of the most stable mining economies in Latin America, and that certainly accords with everything that I've seen. I think at least my understanding of Brazilian legislation, it's regulated well from the federal level, and the states regulate things like local environmental regulations and things like that. But there's a very pro-mining environment. And also, Brazil has many years of experience in mining. It's got some of the largest iron ore mines in the world, and that experience has allowed it to welcome foreign investment in rare earths or lithium, and to really capitalize on its own resources. It's a different environment from other Latin American countries in many respects, insofar as there are more political swings, let's say, in certain other Latin American jurisdictions, where you might have a pro-mining, pro-investment government that comes in, and then that suddenly changes. A case in point is probably Argentina at the moment. We've seen, Milei come in, and he's offering all sorts of tax incentives, and they have this. He's just announced a large and long-term investment scheme, particularly with the mining sector in mind, which is offering great tax incentives over a long period. The problem, and what we see in the past in Argentina and other Latin American jurisdictions, is that political shifts occur, and in 4 or 5 years that changes, and then that changes the economics of a project all of a sudden, which can cause great difficulties. So that's why, you know, part of the reason that I was invited was to talk about some of the protections available to Australian miners in particular operating in Latin America. Argentina, Chile, Peru, Mexico, they're the key jurisdictions that have actually actively sought to attract Australian investment by signing various investment treaties, offering those incentives and protections to Australian mining companies. But lots of other Latin American jurisdictions have those protections in place as well, which can be accessed by Australian companies using various sort of corporate structures around the world. So it's important for I guess, Australian miners operating in the region to know that they can, to a certain extent, be insulated from some of those political changes that occur.
Thanks, Elliot. I'd like to come back to that point a little later on, actually. But Chris, can I come back to you in Elliot's point about those pendulum swings between political approaches and investment climates in the region? There's a perception in Australia of Latin American countries' investments as being risky, that politics may change quickly. What's your experience, having worked in a number of countries there? Is it a misconception? Is it a well-held, understandable perception?
It certainly is. Now, for 15 years, we've been trying to educate the Australian investment community that Latin America's a good place to invest. You did mention in your question on this piece of paper about Africa, and you're not going to ask me about Africa.
No, I'm more than happy to. I mean, we've actually, you know, we said if you look at the success stories in Latin America compared to Africa.
Let's look at the African success stories. AVZ. Leo Lithium, Firefinch. I've just learnt that. Mitch, is it Barrick Gold?
I didn't get the African question.
Well, you're about to get it. Barrick Gold in Mali. The Mali government are using Russian troopers to take over their gold mine. You don't see any of that. My point is, you don't see any of that in South America, apart from Bolivia. There's only probably 5 countries you go to. It's Chile, Brazil, Argentina, Peru, and maybe Colombia. Sorry, John. Maybe Colombia. I haven't seen a deal. And Ecuador is looking like it's coming good again, right? The other countries, and John Jones is there, he's spent a bit of time in Guyana, you know, has some success, not so, but there's a certain few countries that you wouldn't go to Tasmania and do any mining, would you? Would we, boys? No, I don't think we'd head to Tasmania. A few have tried. So it's horses for courses. Ministrise, where we're operating, is English name's General Mining. It's been operating for 200 years as a mining country. It's 300 operating mines. Vale, you know, Rio, BHP, Kinross. It's just a wonderful jurisdiction to do mining. Chile's #1 copper producer in the world. Peru's now #2. If you want copper, you go to Chile or Peru, right? And look, Zambia and some great countries in Africa that have got good copper deposits, but they don't have an Escondida. They don't have a Carajás. $20 billion invested by Vale into Carajás. I can't remember the last time 20 billion was invested in a project in Africa for development. It's one of the largest iron ore mines in the world now. So this perception, and I think Paydirt have a little bit of ownership of this. Dom's been to South America a couple of times, and I'll ask you the question, right? Compared to Africa, I'm sorry, I've never been to Africa, right? So I shouldn't comment, but but what's your perception of Africa v South America? You've been on their projects, you've just come back from there. What's your view?
So if we're cherry picking the success stories and the failures, I mean, if you look at Leo and AVZ, yes, and I'm sure, I know Elliot and his colleague Rudolph has got plenty to say on these topics, but there's also a number of recent successes. Perseus Mining is now
They've never had government take them over, though. They've never had government lift taxes to 30%. It's been really the operations or something's mucked up. Mirabelle and Nickel's a perfect one. That just got sold for $1 billion, right? That went broke.
Yeah, well, that way. So
But it's a timing of...
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
So this is my question then.
It's not so
Ultimately-
much the jurisdictions, Tom, that cause issues in South America, unless, of course, you go to Bolivia or something like that. Right?
So why haven't we seen the same levels of success?
We were the 8th junior explorer in South America in 2008. There's now over 60 Australian junior explorers. There's over 200 Canadians. The Canadians have been running the place exploration-wise for 30 years. But the Australians have a lot more respect because we actually look at the proper community issues. We deal with the communities a lot different than the Canadians. We have a tremendous amount of respect there. I will say in some of those countries, the communities can now cause issues if you don't get it right. But when we first went in there, we would do things like in the local town, we'd set up a little office, information centre, communities would come through, they would talk to them, and water's normally the main thing that gets the communities offside, that you're going to steal their water. We actually inform them and educate them that we're not doing that, we're going to improve, blah, 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 right? But Canadians are a different animal altogether, right? They don't have the focus we have. That's why I think we've become so successful. And anyone wants to talk to me about places like Minas Gerais, I encourage it. We had We've had a number of companies, junior explorers out, Australian companies, on our site to try and encourage them to come in and have a look at, you know, a whole host of different minerals, rare earths, niobium, nickel, copper, gold, lithium. You know, it's there for the picking. Western Australia's done in lithium, it's done. There's no more big azure deposits. They're going to be bought for... And,
Yeah, that is a big...
how much you want? How much you're racing, Tony? But that's not me saying that, I can tell you. It's a couple of companies up there that have looked around and there's no more big deposits sitting around in WA that have good grade and what we think is viable. But there's plenty available in the countries I just mentioned.
Thanks, Chris. Elliot, can I just come back to you on a point that Chris made? He did mention the social challenges and ESG challenges in the region, and they are very distinct, aren't they? Particularly in places like Peru or parts of Chile to an extent, Argentina in particular in certain provinces. Issues, we've seen issues at Los Bambas over access, as Chris mentions, water issues, land use issues. Can companies use international law treaties and investment treaties to position themselves to manage those situations, or is it a case of working harder on the ground?
Absolutely, they can use international treaties to manage those situations. Working harder on the ground, it doesn't hurt. You know, influencing and bringing local communities on board is very important. It's interesting, just going back briefly to the Africa discussion and the Malian example of sending in the Russian troops. You're right, that's not something that we tend to see in Latin America these days. The Venezuela, the Chavez days are long gone. But what we see is exactly what you're talking about, Dominic, are ESG-related risks where local communities are not on board, environmentally protected areas are suddenly delimited that sort of take over part of a mine. These are the kind of risks. Now, where you have an international treaty and Australian investors are protected by a few, but not throughout Latin America. But where you have that international treaty, that can often give the miner some leverage with the local authorities. The local authorities being sometimes very local in the region of the project, or sometimes at the national level. As I mentioned before, a lot of Latin American countries have actively sought to seek investment into their mining sectors, and they've offered a certain number of incentives for that to happen. They've guaranteed that they won't expropriate either directly or indirectly projects, they've guaranteed that they will give Australian investors fair and equitable treatment. They've guaranteed that they will physically protect mine sites, for instance. So as an international investor, if you're running into any of those problems, you have leverage to go to the local authorities and say, look, I'm being caused loss here. This is harming my project. You need to come on side and help me out. If they don't, there are sometimes mechanisms available to the investor to actually seek recompense where they've suffered harm as well. So those international treaties are very, very powerful, and I think they're often not entirely understood amongst the Australian mining community. So if anyone has any questions afterwards, please come and talk to me.
Thanks, Elliot. Kristy, it comes back to your point as well. You mentioned an international board at Brazilian Rare Earths, but specifically you mentioned your CEO, who has got a mix of Australian and Brazilian heritage background. How important is it to have in-country expertise and knowledge to be successful and get on the ground and be able to work at the speed that Chris talks about?
Yeah, well, obviously it's super important. Doesn't matter where you are. A lot of people will find it difficult to, as an example, break into the Perth market, because if you don't know people in Perth, it's very, very difficult. I think that's the case no matter where you go. And back to your question too around why haven't Australian companies been successful? Maybe it's starting to happen more because it's a long way. On Saturday when I fly over, it's 29 hours. So if you're trying to run a business from here over there, very hard. And it's not like you can jump on a plane and fly over to Africa, which is a lot closer. So obviously Perth's very close. So that could be a factor in it. But obviously if you've got people in country that understand the technical side, the political side, that's a fundamental aspect of anything being economic. Obviously the political side is a risk. The location is a risk. They're all economics 101 of a project that you must consider. So yes, 100%, having people on the ground. We've got a Brazilian CFO as well as an Aussie CFO. So we've got an office. It'll be good to go and see the office and meet the people in person. But yes, 100%.
Great, thanks, Kristy. Chris, I want to come back to our point about perceptions and that traditional perception of South America as an investment destination. Is it changing? Are you experiencing a change because of the success that you have had, that Brazilian Rare Earths have had, Meteoric and so forth?
Well, I think it is. I think I know that Fortescue now got offices in Brazil and in Argentina. And it's not just green hydrogen. They're looking Hancock in Ecuador, making investments in there, and now Brazilian Rare Earths is, they're very smart people, the Hancock people. So they do a lot of DD. They just don't go into these areas without doing their due diligence and investing. So that's terrific, I think, for the area.
And from investors themselves, shareholders, are the questions around what is Brazil like as an investment destination? Are they as frequent as they were on Peru or Argentina 6 or 7 years ago?
Yeah, we had 24 funds run through our project, Sigma and Latins, in October. And we're starting to become more proactive with funds from US, UK, Australia. That was really successful. And it's up to us to educate the investor as well, right? We've got 12,000 investors. We have now, Vanguard just went substantial in Latin a month ago. So we're starting to see big US funds, but the US, North America gets South America. Australians still struggle with it. We've got 28% institutional investors in our company now. It lifted 3% last month, but most of them US. So we've still got a lot of work to do with Australian funds, but they're getting there. They're getting there.
Let me stay with you, Chris, a second. The projects we're talking about here are critical minerals projects, lithium, rare earths. We're having a big debate, continue to have a debate here in Australia about how we participate in that energy transition, how we use our critical minerals to extract maximum value as a country. Are we seeing policies developing in Brazil and elsewhere on the continent? And is it a similar discussion narrative over there?
Yeah, well, Peru and Chile are fine because they have free trade agreements with Australia, which qualifies them for the IRA. it's public now that we are more than confident the G20's in Brazil in November, that there will be a critical minerals agreement signed between the Brazilian government and the US government. The Secretary of State will be at the G20 and they'll announce that in November. It's out public now. So that's going to open up a massive pathway again into Brazil in particular, especially with rare earths, copper, lithium, nickel, those critical minerals that the US are screwing for. The US are in a shitload of pain, right? Excuse the French, but they're building all this conversion, lithium hydroxide plants, battery factories, gigafactories. They don't have any raw materials. And unless they get raw materials from somewhere, they're going to be in they're going to have a lot of problem getting those projects up and actually operating consistently. So that's big for there. So we're going to see, I think, a lot more. Chile's right, Peru's right, Brazil's going to be right. There's no free trade agreement between Brazil and US yet, but that critical minerals agreement between the two countries will, I think, open up more exposure, more interest from the exploration side into Brazil.
Kristy, is this a conversation Brazilian Rare Earths has as a company about how you position yourselves to capture this critical minerals directive out of the US, how you can take advantage of that?
Yeah, so it's definitely something that has been everyone knows about the IRA, so of course it just depends on what does come out of this G20 towards the end of the year. But I think it's also important to remember that Brazil gets, I think, roughly 90% of its power from renewable sources, hydro, wind and solar, which is unique, especially in mining jurisdictions. So you can connect to the grid and you get your power from renewable source. That's pretty good. But yeah, I think what Chris is saying is extremely interesting. It will be to see what the US does with regards to, but I mean, you would think that with it being so close, it would make sense.
And that's the other point, of course. The advantage of the location, like shipping costs. We're doing our DFS now. Shipping costs from Brazil to China are $82 a tonne. Into the US, it's 40. And Chris brings up a great point about renewable energy in Brazil. 85% of Brazil is renewable energy. Ministrised is 96. Hydro will be running our plant 5 cents a kilowatt hour. Like it's crazy stuff, right? It's just ridiculous stuff. Our operating costs will be $530 a tonne for lithium. Sigma running at $440. It's the taxes. 15% corporate tax, 2% royalty. Labour costs are a quarter of what they are here in Australia. We would pay, and we pay a good operator, truck driver, around good money in Brazil, about 35, 40,000 US a year. There's no sure, I think there's any change there, 200, 250,000 for a truck driver at the Pilbara. So all that, and put on top the energy costs, it's sort of a no-brainer,
And we're pretty slow in Australia about getting anything done, aren't we?
Yeah.
With the time it takes to get permits and approvals and the cost and... encourage everyone to sort of start looking at Brazil. And look, Peru and Chile are great as well. If you want copper, that's where you go.
Elliot, are we seeing an impact from these critical minerals policies or the pivot towards this energy transition in government policies around critical minerals in the region? I know Chile has introduced a national lithium strategy. Argentina's talking about a similar strategy. Mexico, of course, has nationalised its entire lithium resources. What are you seeing from that trend in the region?
Yeah, I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is countries really grappling with how to capitalise on their own resources and how to ensure that some of the benefits of those those plentiful resources are actually sort of visited upon the local communities and into the local coffers. So, I mean, Chile's a good example. It was reported that they had nationalized their lithium sector. That was not the case at all. It was more an increase in local participation, which was quite a sophisticated way to do it. At the other end of the spectrum, as you mentioned, Mexico has not only nationalized its lithium industry completely, but there is at least one enormous lithium project which was nationalized via a backdoor sort of process, which has led to an enormous international dispute, which was recently filed at the World Bank. Short answer to your question is seeing seeing Latin American states try and grapple with how to capitalize on those resources is definitely influencing policy, and it has an impact on international investors, absolutely.
Chris, you've taught the corner of South America.
Your question either.
My question.
My question.
About Africa. I mean,
how do you compare Africa?
Yeah,
to,
I mean, when we were cherry picking.
No.
When we were cherry picking expropriation projects, I very politely left out First Quantum Minerals in Panama to make sure that your argument was still correct.
We'll see,
I could see Elliot was desperate to jump in there.
We'll see who gets back what first.
Chris, I'm asking the questions here. I think you'll find. This is how our interviews usually go, Chris, but it's usually in a private room. Can I ask, with this success, we're seeing more companies enter the region, Australian companies enter the region and be successful. Is it going to continue? There was a perception for a long time that, as you mentioned, the Canadians get South America. The Canadians have been there. There was a perception for a long time that Canadian companies were already there. They tied up all the best ground. Whatever Australian companies could get was only what Canadians had left. Is there an opportunity now for this wave of Australian investment to carry on and growing?
Well, if you look at the cycle at the moment, and I can only really talk about lithium, it's a great opportunity because when we first went to Brazil, 2019, we were picking up, the properties we have now, we're picking up for, call it, 25,000, 12-month option, spending X amount of money in the ground to get 100%, paying another 100,000 to take out that 100% option. That was back in 2019, and we secured all our ground. We've actually acquired all our ground for just over $5 million. So we own everything, surface and exploration rights and mining rights now. During the boom of 22, 23, the lithium boom, that went up 10 times because everyone started coming. I saw the success of Sigma, saw the success of Latin, and everyone came and sport. What's happened is gone back again because lithium prices come off, exploration dollars aren't there. It's a great opportunity now to get back in, Tony. Get back to South America, find some lithium. You've done the best deal in 20 years with a project at Azure. There's an opportunity for guys like Tony and those sorts of people to get back in and with his teams and start developing these projects 100%. And not just not lithium.
Coming back.
Yeah. Give me a call first, will you? But copper, nickel, and Kristy, rare earths. There's a buffet, there's a gourmet there if you want it. And I'm serious about Western Australia. It's hard. It takes a long time to get your permits. We put our permit in December in 21 and we're drilling in February 22. And I think Kristy's other point, which is really important, is that we have 300 people on site. We have 60 from local town. We have 35 geologists, but 2 of those are expats, the rest are locals. And you've got to run the company like from Brazil, from Peru. You have the right people. I will say that you generally have to have an expat to create that sense of urgency. Because it's normally, as our South American friends here, mañana is a great word. We'll get it done tomorrow. So I think the Australians are very good at creating a sense of urgency and instilling that into your people, local people, that we need to get this done. And they get it done. They're brilliant.
And there's another aspect that I really noticed when I travelled to Chile to the Exponor conference in Antofagasta, is the sheer size of the services sector and the met sector in South America and investigating it in Brazil. It's very similar to Chile. These are huge mining economies with deep expertise and skills, not only in geology and exploration, but in all sorts of mining services. It's it's a real opportunity for cross-pollination, rather than perhaps going into a country in Africa where the level of skills development is much lower. Or the mining industry is much more nascent in its experience and its in-country opportunities. Kristy, is the success that you've witnessed with Brazilian rare earths, is it inspiring you to start looking for other opportunities? Have you had other people coming to you asking about opportunities in South America?
Well, no, not actually. I mean, we only listed 6 months ago, so when I go and see it next week, I'll probably be even more inspired, I would say, because there's nothing like being there. Yes, you can look at pictures, but to be there and actually get a sense. And I think it's also important, an advantage that Aussie companies, or being listed on the ASX, you have to adhere to certain governance standards. So you need to keep your people safe, you need to have certain policies, procedures in place. I think that's all very valuable for people on the ground over there as well, because obviously in more developing countries or countries that aren't as advanced as us from those perspectives, they wouldn't be thinking along those lines. So that's something that we can also bring to those companies or to those individuals in those jurisdictions. But it's early days, Dom. We'll see.
Thank you. Well, Chris has run out of questions for me, so it's about time that I open the floor.
Can I just touch on that your point
Sure,
about
yeah.
mining expertise?
Yeah.
Belo Horizonte in Brazil is twice the size of Perth. I'm sure that Brazilian Rare Earths would use some of the engineers, and twice as many mining consultants as Perth. And Perth's massive, right? And that's a great point. Chile's the same. Peru, all the big names are there. You have a mining community that you can tap into. We've got 35 geologists, and they're very, very good geologists, very process-driven, and it's just great to be able to have that. As I said, I don't know, I understand Africa, I have never been there, but and there's a very good point about expertise within those countries, Peru, Chile, Argentina, and certainly Brazil's the top of the ladder, along with Chile.
Thanks, Chris. We've got the microphone, and our diplomat is ready to ask a question.
Diplomat.
Thanks very much.
I thought he was a broker.
I'll ask wearing my stockbroking hat from Euros Heartless, if you like. But Elliot sort of went round the grounds with a few of the jurisdictions, and we've had a good chat about what we're all doing, particularly in Brazil. But just generally, while we're all in the room, the outlook, obviously, Chris would be interested in your comments about why we should all go long lithium at the moment. Obviously, rare earths is in, fantastic space at the moment. Congratulations on a great float. But looking at things like Corazon and nickel, etc., looking at things like, no one's mentioned gold, uranium, and there's people here looking at uranium. Given it's a panel discussion about South America and we're here down under, and it's a great jurisdiction, as obviously Chris has made a very strong point, what should we be looking for, and what are we bullish about, and what are we given up on nickel? We still love copper. Do we like just around the grounds with the various commodities?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Look, I'll just answer quite simply with lithium. We did our PEA, our scoping study last year, and for our lithium price in the PEA we used $1,699, which was the long-term average between Fast Market and Benchmark, two of probably the leading lithium analysts on the globe, from 25 to 35. So the long-term average from 25 to 35 was $1,699. We're just doing our DFS now, to be out in a couple of months. We've just run the analysis. long-term average, fast markets, benchmark, 25.35, it's $2,200. Lithium prices are going up in the next 2-3 years. So it's going to be pretty tough in the next 12 months. But what we're seeing is those projects here in Australia, they're going to be running at $1,000. We're seeing one in Northern Territory called Core. They've had to mothball it because they're not going to make money. Our operating costs in Brazil, as I said earlier, $530. See, we're running at $440. That's another good reason to be in a jurisdiction, a low-cost operating environment. So are those high-cost lithium mines going to actually get online to provide the supply? Africa is an issue. There's 80,000 tonnes alone. LCE came out of Africa in December, we understand, and there'll be more. But there's some high grade, some low grade. That will be an issue for a little bit longer. Lepidolite, the largest lepidolite in China, has just been shut down. That was shut down last month. So the Chinese know that at $3,500 a tonne, it's not viable. And the Chinese government not going to continue to fund those operations. So look, there'll be a turnaround. You've been in the commodities market for a long time. Matt Parker's here from Hartley's. We see these cycles. It's a great opportunity to get in there. Brazil has just, and on the uranium side, Brazil again, they've got a nuclear reactor. They've been mining uranium there for 60 years. The government made an announcement in February of 22 that they're looking for private investment in uranium. So watch this space. It's going to open up, and they've got some excellent properties through there. There's some actually big uranium mines through there, but the government, because what you used to have to do in Brazil was if you found any uranium, you had to notify them because it was a state mineral, and you had to sell that to them at the spot price. That's going to change, and that'll be announced over the next couple of months that uranium will be. I met with the senior person of the Uranium Energy Division 4 weeks ago, and they're open for business. So that's going to be next. Gold I can't really comment on, but there's some good opportunities in Colombia for gold.
Yeah, Elliot, this is a point, and those avid readers of Paydirt will have read Elliot's comments in our May edition, in our Latin America feature. You mentioned Colombia as a prospective jurisdiction from a regulatory perspective, didn't you?
Yeah, less so from a regulatory perspective, more from an opportunity perspective. I think, Colombia has, particularly in gold, we see it has a long history of gold mining that goes back way before pre-Columbian meaning pre-Columbus times, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So there's a lot of gold there. One of the tricky sides of gold mining in particular in Colombia and beyond actually is you have this issue of artisanal mining across Latin America, which can cause some serious, environmental degradation, but also from an international investor's perspective, it causes some real local tensions. Colombia I certainly see as a jurisdiction that has a huge amount of potential. The artisanal mining aspect is a problem that sort of needs to be addressed. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Did we have another question? Oh, sorry.
On nickel and Corazon? What was your specific question? Oh, it's very tough, yeah. It's very tough. We've got a copper potential over in New South Wales too, which we need to drill, but it's raining a lot at the moment. I actually spoke to the MD just before we came in, who's as sick as a dog with influenza A, and our chair passed away on Monday. So Terry Streeter, for those who may or may not know, really good guy, really sad. But yeah, nickel's crap. Yeah, who knows? Fundamentally though, we do need nickel. So it's just a case, and we all know what's happening in Indonesia. Interestingly, BHP had some of those mines years ago. I know because I moved there with my ex-husband for a particular project, for a laterite project that didn't go ahead. Who knows?
Kristy, just on that.
Yep.
We saw cobalt in Africa being phased out because of Apple and Tesla. All of a sudden, from the ESG point of view, and they basically, from what I understand, apart from Glencore, stop. Will you see that in Indonesia, do you
Well,
think?
I don't know, because I mean they're fueling these plants by coal. Coal's not banned. Slave labour's not tolerated. So I guess we'll just have to see how it plays out. I mean, fundamentally, they can produce it cheaper than anywhere else, and that's unless, I mean, the OEMs in America and so on that are building batteries and constructing cars, they say they don't want non-ESG product, but will they pay for it? That is the question. So I think we just need to, as a collective, as a globe, try and figure out what we do, because something must be done in terms of exactly what. We need to work out what that is. But yeah, nickel's not great right now for those who can't produce it very cheap.
And saying very cheap, we've seen just lately Centaurus Metals also in Brazil produce a feasibility study, which Michael Washburn has been interviewing Darren Gordon this week. He might be able to argue better. Centaurus believe they can produce a nickel sulfide concentrate for the same cost as the Indonesians can produce their final product as well. So again, and relying upon hydropower and low cost power in Brazilian setting. Thanks, John. Did we have another question or comment? I've got a question. Yes, you've got a microphone behind you.
No, Brett Dixon. Chris, I'm not sure I agree with you that WA is done and dusted. And Africa, I'd say it's probably jurisdictional. But I agree with you that Latin America and South America in particular is a great jurisdiction. So apart from Brazil, what are your next top two?
What, sorry?
Next top two jurisdictions
I
to
think,
go to in Latin
Brett,
America?
certainly Chile is, I call Chile the Singaporean, the Singapore of Latin America. Very sophisticated, very well run, a lot of money there. Peru's really coming ahead. It's just the permitting. Peru takes so long. Get a drill permit in Peru is 9 months. Argentina at the moment, I'm sorry, is a basket case, you know. Economically, and I will say only in some states, Catamarca, Jujui's not bad, Salta's not, but Catamarca's difficult at the moment. I just keep, you know, having worked in all those countries, and you go to somewhere like Brazil where the community want the project, the government wants the project. To give you an indication, just Brett, to give you an indication of something in Brazil, right? Minas Gerais. We got a small airport in Salinas where our project is. It's got a good runway strip, that sort of stuff. Anna from Gabel from Sigma and I met with the governor, it would have been June, July last year, and said it'd be great if we can get commercial flights, like 12-seater King Airs into Salinas from Belo, so we can service with consultants coming in, blah, blah, blah. 3 months later, I got a phone call, Chris, the first commercial flight from Azul will be flying in Salinas. Like, I nearly fell off my chair, right? Try that here. Try getting a commercial flight organised within 3 months. The government picks up the phone and says, get these commercial flights happening. We need to build this industry, you know. We just put $40,000 in for a study to get radar to fly jets into there now. And that'll be up and running by March next year. So I'm finding it really hard to get past Minas Gerais in Brazil at the moment. But Chile for copper, Chile and Peru, outstanding. Go for it.
Thanks, Brett. Great question. Do we have any other... Chris has just been talking about Argentina. Is our Archam table not going to... They're still celebrating from Monday's victory, obviously.
I will ask a question. So how do you fly to South America now? Because for the last 8 years, we have been trying to convince everyone to have a direct flight, transborder flight to Buenos Aires.
They used to have it, right?
No, it used to be via Auckland. So what we are proposing is
Auckland into Buenos Aires, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
What we are proposing is a 14 hours flight to Buenos Aires from here. So it is...
Our friend who has been working on this for how long now?
8 years.
8 years. And he's trying hard.
But I have good news. So 10 days ago, Argentina proposed an open skies air service agreement to Australia. It's the same air service agreement that was signed by Canada, also 10 days ago. So if you have friends in the federal government, I encourage you to call them and ask about this agreement, because if Australia signed this air service agreement, the road Perth, Buenos Aires is going to become way more attractive. So chances are that China Southern, LATAM or Qantas could do it. And we have been discussing about that with many of them. I had a meeting with Richard Goyder, for example, before he left Qantas, and he said that if Western Australia provide the same level of support that provided to Ron Perth, they can do it. So the only thing that we need to do is convince Roger Cook to bet on this flight.
Good luck.
Support Qantas.
Good luck.
And it's going to fly. It's going to happen. So we all know South America. You all know Buenos Aires probably, and then you know that if there is a direct flight, it's going to be successful. The challenge that we are getting from the Chamber of Commerce is that no one in the government knows South America. They never ever went there. So I take the opportunity to make this comment, and if you have friends in government, call them and ask them. So, and by the way, from today, Dario is taking over the Chamber of Commerce. He's going to be the next president. Dario is the former president of the Energy Club. So that's it.
My favourite city is in South America is Buenos Aires, by far.
Yeah, it's by far the best.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for the rate.
Thank you, Diego. And, after so many years since we had the last Latin America Down Under and global pandemics and lithium up and downs and the introduction of rare earths, I'm glad to still see that some things are still the same, and you are still banging that brilliant drum for Perth to Buenos Aires.
Well done, Diego.
Thank you very much. Did we have any other comments or questions? Because we're about to wrap up. Well, I mean, we've got a couple of minutes, so I'm going to dip into my book of emergency questions here.
Can I ask you one?
You've used up all your questions, Chris. I'm going to start with.
Ever win?
I'm going to start with.
The Euro Cup.
I'm going to start with Elliot. And it's been 58 years. What's another 2 years to us? Brett has sort of pinched my my question, but he said it a lot more elegantly than my emergency question has. We've all played the game Shag, Marry, Kill, where I pick 3 celebrities and you have to decide which one you'll sleep with, which one you will marry, and which one you will kill.
None of you, thanks.
This is my mining version of it. So, Elliot, you've discovered Greenbushes 2.0 in 3 different Latin America jurisdictions. I'll even let you pick which 3. In which jurisdiction are you going to build your Greenbushes 2.0? In which jurisdiction are you going to sell your Greenbushes 2.0? And in which jurisdiction are you going to hedge your bets and just joint venture it out to a big...
It's a good question. I used to live in Buenos Aires, and I lived for a while in Rio, I was saying earlier, so it's a difficult decision there, but I think I've been reintroduced to Brazil today. So I think build in Brazil. Unfortunately, maybe sell in Argentina. What was the third option?
JV, joint venture, something else.
Yeah, JV in Peru. Spread the risk of social uprising.
We'll come to you in a second, Chris, because you half answered the question. Kristy, build, sell, JV.
I don't know. I'd need to go and have a good look at the countries and more of a, right now I couldn't answer that. I don't have enough info on each. I'd just be going on gut feel and just guessing. Over there somewhere.
Okay. Thank you. Chris, where would you build Greenbushes? Where would you sell it? Where would you joint venture it?
What you say? Are you saying selling the material or
the project itself?
Oh,
so you found the next Greenbushes.
Brazil and Brazil.
Do we have any more final questions? Thank you very much for your answers.
John?
Just a quick comment. Thanks to Paydirt. Great to be here. What I find with your 3 speakers, they certainly don't want to build anything in Australia, which is where I just want you to make a quick comment. We are on jungle juice or iron ore juice, whatever you want to call it. And you can hear Mr. Gale saying, costs. We're on jungle juice, out of control in Australia. I hear iron ore producers now quivering just with one project in Africa there, Rio's one, Simadu or whatever it is, whatever it's called. I mean, that is now being touted as a risk to the Pilbara. Can you imagine we're losing employment in Australia on production nickel, which I've had a bit of association with. When it goes straight down. And we've seen this time around with Indonesia. My concern for Australia is it seems to rank behind all these. I know it does Brazil because I've been there, done it, and it's a wonderful country to be in, and it's very cost effective. Frankly, we have a business in the Philippines. One person in Perth working, we can employ 8 people in the Philippines. Australian miners, Australian governments will have to think very carefully about what they do with the wage structures in the future. Global competition is real, and I congratulate the people up there having the courage to take on some projects, particularly in Brazil. And I think you're real competition there, and I'm not surprised you want to build the green bushes thing in Brazil. But I didn't hear anyone mumble something about Australia. Thank you.
Because that's the options he gave us.
Yeah, I didn't give him any Australian options. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
We've got one more question, have we?
Actually, it's an observation. So I'll wear my diplomatic hat this time, if you like. And that is just listening to Africa versus South America. There's a professor, Ben Riley, who did a piece in terms of Indo-Pacific, Asia-Pacific, all that sort of thing. He talked about the Southern Hemisphere, if you like, and this has been taken up by South 32. If you look at the line of latitude, everything below a certain line of latitude is resources. It's ours. So a different way of looking at the region is like that. That we have these things in common. I think if we get the airline happening, and the other observation I'd make is there's so many Latin Americans coming here in droves, and it's one of those places where, notwithstanding the fact that we have issues trying to manufacture and develop things here, but you can actually watch the sun go down over the Indian Ocean, listening to salsa music or samba music or whatever in Scarborough. It's happening. So it's not a bad way to look at it, particularly if we get that airline happening eventually.
You could easily get statistics on it, though. You could, the airlines would know how many people do fly over that way and back, and that would be interesting to see as a base point, because there probably are more people flying both ways than we do realise. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We've run out of time, unfortunately, but it's been a great discussion. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for the questions. Kristy, thanks. Luke, Elliot, thanks for not asking me any questions. It's been a real pleasure, and as I say, hopefully this is just the start of Paydirt's push back into Latin America. There'll be coverage of this event in next month's magazine in the September edition, as there'll be coverage of my trip to Chile. A video of this session will also be available on our Paydirt TV YouTube channel next week, so you'll be able to download it then and send it on to anybody who missed it. But thank you very much, and please join me in thanking our guests, Kristy, Chris and Elliot.